right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and welcome to what I think is our ninth of our virtual history series with us and the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. Thanks for everybody who is joining us and returning to us. And if you're new, thanks for tuning in for the first time. We do these every Friday, or as close to every Friday as we can. We did them through COVID, and we're continuing onwards. Thanks especially to all of those who made a voluntary contribution, the Baltimore Architecture Foundation and Baltimore Heritage. We have a combined staff of about 3, so donations of any sizes are super appreciated. Thank you, thank you. Before I introduce today's speaker, just want to give a preview for what's coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about how buildings and building materials age. And if that sounds a little bit dry, I can guarantee you it will not be. We're going to talk about the Roland Park Water Tower and even as far away as the US Capitol. So join us for that. And then the following week, we're going to be joined by a woman, Mary Rizzo, who is the author of a book called Come and Be Shocked, Baltimore Beyond John Waters and the Wire. And it is going to be a, roll yourself in all things Baltimore for a half hour on Friday. So come on out for that one. All right, so but we're going to get rolling with today. Today it's thrilling. We've got Enrica Jang here from the Poe House, and I want to say thanks to her for joining us. A couple years ago, I had the opportunity to go up to Philadelphia, and for those of you who are not uber Poe fans, you'll know that Philadelphia has a Poe House also. And I went up there, and it's a wonderful place. It's in Philadelphia. The National Park Service runs it. So it's a national park site, sort of like Fort McHenry. And I was sort of thinking, well, geez, what do we have? And then I realized what we have, in addition to the body, we've got Poe's body at Westminster Hall, but we've got Enrica, and she has been a fantastic director of the Poe House. They might have the whole National Park Service, but we've got her. She's organized things like Poe in Comics talks, flash fiction contests, and then, of course, before COVID, the Poe Festival, which brought together all sorts of Poe related stuff. So we might have a small house and a small staff, but we have got some energy behind it. And so I'm going to say thanks to Enrica for both doing what she's doing, and then turn it over to you. We're all yours. For everybody who's on the call today, if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box, and we're going to get to as many of them as we can at the end. All right, Enrica, I'm turning it over. We're all yours.
Well, first, thank you, Johns, and thank you for stealing 2 of my best jokes, my wire joke and my we have the body joke. Not fair, but we do have the body. Baltimore has the body. It is true. There are other Poe houses. Poe in his lifetime never owned property. Now that he's dead, you can visit 3 of his houses. The one that we'll be talking about today here in Baltimore is the oldest and the only one that is left here in the city of Baltimore. The best one. I might be a little bit biased, maybe, but I'm also right. Philadelphia is quite wonderful, though, and you can sneak up to New York City and visit the Poe Cottage in the Bronx, and that is quite wonderful. There is a wonderful Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia. It used to be called the Poe Shrine, and now is the Poe Museum. Poe did spend a good amount of time in Richmond, Virginia. However, none of the Allen family homes survived the Civil War. So wonderful museum, but not a Poe house. So we've got some advantages there, but thank you so much for having me today. It's always wonderful to be thought of and invited. Thank you so much. I am going to try to switch screens, and we'll get going here with my presentation. Do let me know if any trouble seeing or hearing, and I'm going to move some chat over here so I can see some comments. So you should see on my screen here. Let me know if you can see that. Welcome to my virtual history of the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum at 203 North Amity Street in Baltimore, Maryland. It's a very, very tiny house museum in West Baltimore, a neighborhood called Poppleton. not very far from the B&O Railroad Museum. As a matter of fact, or the Irish Workers Railroad Memorial, not far from them either. But we are open on a very limited basis to be talking about that. But thank you for joining the tour today, and thank you for having me. Poe Baltimore is the nonprofit organization created to fund, maintain, and interpret the Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum. I am director of Poe Baltimore, and the first part of our mission is, of course, to keep Poe's chamber door open to visitors, both in person and online, now online. For the second part of our mission really is to share with people Edgar Allan Poe's legacy, celebrating Poe's legacy both here in Baltimore and beyond. And what do I mean by that? Really sharing with people, drawing a direct line from Edgar Allan Poe to the present day and sharing how he has had such an outsized impact on our popular culture. John did give a wonderful brief bio. I am a newly minted Baltimorean. I am told you have to live here for at least 30 years before you get to say that you're from Baltimore. So I've got another 24 years to go. But I joined this organization on March 2017. And as museum time goes, as museum directors go, you have to be a museum director for 20 years before you get to say that you're not new any longer. It's museum time. I was educated at UC Berkeley, and I have an MFA in professional writing from Siena College of Art and Design. Now, plug for Poe House. We are open again on a very limited basis. There are no clicking. We're open for on a reservation only basis at this time. You can visit poebaltimore.org. Our appointment times Thursday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Like many other organizations, we did have to be closed for a couple of months last year, but we've been very fortunate to be able to create virtual programming similar to this online to continue to welcome visitors to Baltimore, even virtually, to learn about Poe, and you can now come and visit. So please consider coming to see us. So today, just a brief outline of what we'll be talking about today. I'm going to introduce to you a little bit of Poe's history in the city of Baltimore. There are some other locations in the city that are associated with Poe. We'll be talking about some of those as well, but we'll be talking about Edgar Allan Poe's family, dating all the way back to the Revolutionary War. Poe's story, very much an American story. So we'll be talking about his close association with the city of Baltimore. Then we're going to talk about the history of the house itself and how the house was saved. Now, I only have about 25 minutes to share this history with you, so a little bit of it is truncated, but I do invite you to visit our website and to come and attend one of our virtual tours if you'd like to get a more in-depth look. And then we'll be talking about the future of Poe House and how the story of Poe House in Baltimore yet to be written and how it will be transformed in the immediate future. So we'll be talking about that soon. All right, so I see a note here, a little bit of clicking. I'm not wearing bangle bracelets, so I'm going to try not to move too much when I present here. Okay. So the interest in Poe, pretty obvious. We're all here. Edgar Allan Poe, one of the world's most famous authors, known, of course, for Gothic works, this Gothic persona from his works. His poem, The Raven, is his most famous piece, but other works, Fall of the House of Usher, Cask of Amontillado, The Telltale Heart, these kinds of Gothic stories that your high school English class, English teacher used to sort of keep you awake in English class. But these known for these Gothic associations, especially around Halloween, we see people all over the world who are so moved by this work. Many people come to Poe House, certainly love of literature, love of history, but there are folks that do come to Poe House because of this fascination with Poe as this enigmatic, dark figure. This romantic idea of madness and just sort of a belief of Poe in isolation. So part of the pleasure of being a historian at Poe House is to share with people that while the truth is just as strange as fiction, we do share the truth of Poe's history with folks and share about how the story became so convoluted for people. So that probably the biggest part of focus for our interactions with people who come to Poe House. They come to Poe House with these notions of Poe, and then we can share the truth of Poe's history with them and have a discussion. Some people do not realize that Edgar Allan Poe is the inventor of detective fiction. It's not that there were no such thing as mysteries before there was an Edgar Allan Poe. However, Poe was the first writer in English literature to create a character at the heart of a story whose job it is to solve that mystery by step-by-step reasoning, ratiocination as it's in his story. And Edgar Allan Poe is the inventor of our understanding of the detective. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, the world's most famous detective, he credits Poe with this invention. Where was the detective story before Poe breathed the breath of life into it? And so sharing with people that any mystery novel you've ever read, any police procedural you've ever seen on TV, or even animation, something like Scooby-Doo, where there is a character who's solving that mystery by this step-by-step process. This is an invention of Edgar Allan Poe's. And so we argue that you will hard-pressed to find another writer who has really influenced literature and popular culture in the way that Poe has. Now we will be talking about Poe's special connection to the city of Baltimore. Was he born in Baltimore? No, he was born in Boston. Was he raised in Baltimore? No, he was raised in Richmond, Virginia by a completely different family. Now his blood relatives here in Baltimore, however, and Poe did live here for a very brief time, but was he living in the city of Baltimore before he happened to die here? The answer is no. So what is this connection to Baltimore? Well, as John's mentioned, we do have the body. He did, in fact, die here, so he lives here now, we'd like to say, but Poe's connection to the city and the events that happened at Poe House and why they're significant. Not just that Edgar Allan Poe lived in this house, but the things that happened to Poe while he was living there. We'll be talking about that today. Outside view and two interior photos of the inside of Poe House. Again, Poe House is a 620 square foot museum. It's even a remnant of the previously existing duplex. And so we'll be talking a little bit about the physical history of Poe House in just a moment. But people, thousands of people come to Baltimore every year to get that authentic Poe experience and of course to visit Edgar. But they come to Poe House and they're startled to see how tiny of a house this is. And of course, during COVID, it's been a little bit difficult. Social distancing is just not possible when you come to Poe House. So our appointments are very limited at this time. However, we do still welcome people to Poe House. And right now, if there's a silver lining, you do get an opportunity to be alone in Poe House and sort of experience the house to yourself. So there's got to be something good that comes out of this, right? And we'll plug our virtual Poe House tours every Thursday and Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. These are pay what you can, and you are invited to join us each week to get more in-depth view and in-depth tour of Poe House, but we'll start talking a little bit about his history. Now, briefly, this is a map of what the city looked like a little bit closer to Poe's day, and you can see that there are a number of other locations by the numbers here associated with Poe. Poe House, stop number 1, the westernmost stop here. Stop number 8 is Westminster Hall and Burial Ground. Less than a mile between these two stops on a really nice day. You can walk from Poe House to the cemetery, go see Poe himself and vice versa. So not a large distance at all. Step number 6, Gunner's Hall, the tavern where Poe was found in 1849 before he was taken to the hospital, the former Church Home and Hospital. Stop number 7, 100 North Broadway, where he died 4 days later. So some of these other locations in the city associated with Poe, no longer standing. Some of them you can still go and visit, but very happy to talk about that. So I promised we would talk about Poe's family here in the city of Baltimore, the Poes of Baltimore, before there was ever an Edgar Allan Poe. Poe's grandparents here in the city, very well known. As a matter of fact, Poe's grandfather, noted for his service in the Revolutionary War, known to General George Washington, as well as the Marquis de Lafayette. And it was the Marquis coming to tour the United States several years after the Revolution, tour the country he had helped fight for. When he comes to Baltimore, he remembers the Poes by name. He remembers David Poe Sr. and his wife Elizabeth by name, because it was Elizabeth Poe who had helped marshal a number of women here in the city of Baltimore to sew 500 pairs of pants for the Marquis de Lafayette soldiers. So Poe's family, I do like to share with people, Poe's grandmother served too, but Poe's family known here in the city of Baltimore. Poe's parents, David Poe Jr., Poe's father, raised here in the city of Baltimore, raised probably to be something a little bit more respectable than the thespian he would become, but instead becoming something boring, like a lawyer. Sorry to the lawyers out there. He becomes, attends the theater, falls in love with the theater, falls in love with a beautiful British actress by the name of Eliza Arnold. And she, he essentially runs away with the circus and hits the road. Now, despite his aspirations, David Poe Jr., not a successful performer and not as successful as his wife, unfortunately, on the road. That there are reviews that still survive talking about for David Poe Jr.'s performances, and he's described as either very boring or very bad, and we can argue about which is worse in the theater, but apparently he was both, sadly. Poe's mother, on the other hand, was a celebrated performer. Now, it's important to note, fame does not equal fortune for any member of the Poe family. However, Poe's mother noted in the theater, the reviews of her performances that survive are quite complimentary. And so this is surmised to have perhaps caused some strife in the couple's marriage, and one of the first mysteries of Edgar Allan Poe's life, ultimate whereabouts and fate of his father. Edgar Allan Poe's father is not with the family in December of 1811 when Poe's mother passes away. Now, Poe's mother, again, celebrated. And because of this, the theater in Richmond, Virginia, where she's at the time of her final illness, appeals to the public on her behalf, saying this beautiful light at the stage, alone in desperate need, and patrons of the theater called to marshal to her side. But her three children are mentioned. Edgar has an older brother named Henry Leonard. Edgar is their middle son, and Rosalie is that young daughter. Now, something pretty cataclysmic happens at this time. Poe's mother does pass away. And because the theater had appealed to the public, this is how the Allan family likely learns of the Poe children, John and Frances Allan, a childless couple in Richmond, Virginia, have no children of their own, very keen to take in little Edgar. The three children are split up. Henry Leonard comes to the Poe family here in Baltimore, raised here. Edgar raised by the Allan family, and the younger sister Rosalie taken in by another family. Now, Edgar is only about 2.5, 3 years old at this time, perhaps too young to truly understand what has happened to his family. However, his older brother, old enough to ask for his little brother, ask about his mother, and this is how the families do keep in loose contact with one another. Poe is raised by the Allans. Now, he is never formally adopted, and it's important to note this because raised by this family, never allowed to forget that he is a foster son, never formally adopted, despite the fact that he takes their name, Edgar Allan Poe. This causes a rift. If you can imagine the kind of sullen teenager that an Edgar Allan Poe would have been, you might feel a little bit bad for John Allan to have to have dealt with the first emo kid, but in his teens, Poe and his foster father do begin to clash with one another, and ultimately, after a failed education and a failed attempt at the United States Military Academy at West Point, Poe is cut off entirely from the Allans. I'll give you a sense of the players whom we are talking about. This image on the left is Elizabeth Poe, Eliza Poe, Edgar's mother. The center image is Maria Clem, Edgar Allan Poe's aunt here in the city of Baltimore. After his initial rift with the Allens, Edgar had made contact with his family, becomes quite good friends, as a matter of fact, with his older brother, and at different times finds refuge with his blood relatives here. After he is ultimately cut off from the Allens, Poe does find a home with Maria Clem, his aunt, and ultimately they end up at Amity Street. Virginia Poe, the image on the right, Poe's first cousin, Maria Clem's daughter, and eventually Edgar Allan Poe's wife. He will marry her. The picture you see on the screen here, Edgar Allan Poe House, circa 1870s. Now, this image, the closest image that we have in time to what Poe House would have looked like in Poe's day. As you know, it's still a duplex here. And we'll be talking about the changes here, but this unit on the left, this unit on the right, note the sally port at the very front of the property here. Again, we are less than a mile away from the B&O Railroad Museum. That museum, of course, raised on the site of the first mile of railroad track ever laid in the United States. The homes in this neighborhood were rental properties. This home was being rented by Poe's aunt, Maria. And so we believe that these properties were built likely to accommodate railroad workers and other people associated with that industry on this street. But the family was renting the unit on the right at this time. Now, the period of time that we are talking about, Poe living at Poe House, 1833 to 1835. Again, doesn't sound like a very long time, but some very significant things happen here. Again, when Poe is cut off from his foster family, ultimately he finds refuge with his aunt's family here, his blood relatives here in Baltimore. Eventually, Poe will turn to short story writing while he's at Amity Street. He'd always been a poet. We have poetry dating back to Edgar's teens and some mention of these undertakings all the way back into his teens. But when he's living here at Amity Street, he turns to short story writing. And while I will show you a list of the pieces that Poe wrote here, these are the early works from the writer. If anyone is interested in seeing that trajectory of Poe's career, while he is living here at Poe House, those endeavors in short story writing, he wins first prize from the Baltimore Saturday Visitor, a local periodical, and this constitutes the very first money that Edgar Allan Poe receives professionally for his work. So pretty significant in the career of the writer. The cachet of that first prize ultimately leads him to network and begin to find his way in a new industry, eventually landing in editorship in Richmond, Virginia, and he will go on to pursue a literary career at this time. So Baltimore gets to say this is the city that discovered Edgar Allan Poe, and Poe House gets to say that this is the house where Poe makes his family, begins his professional writing career. Promised a list of the pieces that Poe wrote here at Poe House. The list on the right, the poems that Edgar wrote here. My favorite in this list is the Colosseum. If you've had an opportunity to visit Rome's stand where the gladiators stood, that poem is quite wonderful. A pretty fiction, however, Poe had never in fact visited Rome. The list on the left are the short stories that Poe wrote while he was living here. And again, these stories, perhaps not the most famous of Poe's career. However, again, many people ask, when did Edgar begin to take on this Gothic bend? When did this interest in these Gothic works begin, in these Gothic subjects, these primal subjects? And our answer is immediately. If you read a manuscript found in a bottle, very atmospheric, very Gothic and graphic descriptions. It's a mystery at sea with corpses hanging from yard arms and these chasms opening up in the water. Really quite amazing. The Visionary, also sometimes called the Estimation, a story of a suicide pact in Venice. Morella, Berenice, these Gothic stories that you may have seen adaptations in Vincent Price films a little bit later. So I invite everyone to find some of these stories. They're actually quite honest, quite wonderful. Now, of course, years later, Poe would die here in Baltimore, and it really was a twist of fate that Poe ended back here in the city where he had family, but because he died here, he could be buried here. some very strange circumstance at the end of Poe's life lead many people to suspect. There are lots of different theories about what killed Edgar Allan Poe, but the truth of the matter is no one knows to this day what truly killed Poe. We at Poe House can reconstruct a timeline for you when Poe was here in the city, when he was found, where he was taken, when he died. But even in this age of forensic science and DNA, a little bit like the identity of Jack the Ripper, there's always a new book talking about what killed Poe or some new theory, and it's really quite fascinating and strange. But Poe is in fact buried here, and visitors to Westminster Hall can see both Poe's graves. If you are interested in hearing more of that story, again, plug, please join one of our Edgar Allan Poe's Death in Baltimore virtual tours. You can visit poebaltimore.org for more information. So, visitors to Poe House now, again, sharing this history of Poe's life, really sort of drawing this line or teasing apart ideas about Poe versus the truth of his history, the different stories that have taken root, the different conspiracy theories. All of these things are fascinating conversations, but just as strange, just as interesting are sort of the present configuration, physical configuration of the actual Edgar Allan Poe house. So I'll be talking to you a little bit about sort of sharing this for a brief history of how this happened. So this picture should look familiar. This is a picture of the original duplex, and I have some notes here because the story gets a little bit strange. This house, the original duplex, again, built in 1832, a two-family row house built for Charles Colosseum, again, rental properties, and Edgar was staying with his Aunt Mariah, who was in fact the one renting this home, caring for her family. Eventually, this is the last residence of Edgar Allan Poe in the city of Baltimore. He actually lived in the city of Baltimore over a period of roughly 6 years, different times. But this home on Amity Street is the last home where Poe and his family were known to have lived, and the only one that survives here in Baltimore. Years later, of course, while he's traveling here, he does die here. Now, this is a home that, again, some people believe that Poe was not very well known in his lifetime, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Poe was quite famous in his lifetime. Again, fame does not equal fortune for any member of the Poe family, but Poe was very well known during his lifetime, very famous after he dies. And so Poe, the house on Amity Street, known to be a residence where Poe had lived with his family. The home was a duplex, not quite the countryside, but this was certainly the edge of town. But then eventually in 1937, the city of Baltimore has pushed further west. And we see that row of townhomes that you see here, row homes that you see. Poe House, still a duplex, a little difficult to tell in this black and white picture, but there's a space here. So still a duplex, even though the unit on the left has been modified by this time. But this photo is actually quite important because of a slum clearance program launched early in the 1930s here in Baltimore, 5 new public housing projects, subsidized housing projects, were slated to be built. And this area was slated for demolition to build the first of 5 projects. Now, everything you see in the picture here is thus slated for demolition. Now, when the Edgar Allan Poe Society of Baltimore hears the last surviving home where Poe and his family were known to have lived is about to be lost forever, they step in and beg the city to save the house. The savior, May Garretson Evans of the Edgar Allan Poe Society of Baltimore, along with the Women's Literary Club, they do appeal to the Housing Authority to please save the house. And a deal is struck that if May Evans can authenticate which side of the house Poe and his family lived in, that part of the house may be saved. And that's what happened. 3 short years later, Poe House chopped in half, and the brand new Edgar Allan Poe homes attached to the house, built on to the house. And here it is in 1940. Now, again, that Sally Port really helps to orient some of these changes. We do see these original features on Poe House still, but the brand new Edgar Allan Poe homes built onto us here. Now, Poe House is initially turned into an administrative building and a nurse's station to serve the families that do live here. But then the Edgar Allan Poe Society steps in again and saves the house and turns it into a house museum in 1949. But some people quite find this to be quite a strange happening, that Poe House and the Poe homes, named, of course, for this association with Edgar Allan Poe, have existed together in this way, and that Poe House has survived for this long. People are shocked when they come to Baltimore and see the house for the first time, but this is a fascinating history and a fascinating juxtaposition. Now, I do have a brief little video that hopefully will pop up here so you can see that this footage taken in April of last year, present day. And we are in a very small pocket park right across the street from the Edgar Allan Poe House. New apartment complex has been built right across the street from Poe House. But as you can see, looking here, the Edgar Allan Poe homes still standing. Now, one of the oldest housing projects in the country. Certainly is extended here. And here we still have the Edgar Allan Poe House. Tiny house museum. In 2019, just before the pandemic, we had welcomed 16,000 visitors to Poe House, a new Poe House record, combination of museum visitors and International Edgar Allan Poe House Poe Festival visitors. We hope to reach those numbers again, but we are reaching that same audience online. So, not Poe. 10 points to anybody who can tell me who did in fact write this. The future is unwritten. Talking about the future of Poe House. We've been a house museum now for over 70 years, almost 75 years. We became a National Historic Landmark in 1972. We are now a United for Libraries literary landmark. And Poe House is a very, very special place, still a touchstone for people from all over the world who celebrate Poe's legacy as we do and are interested in Edgar's history. However, time moves on and the neighborhood who has protected us for such a long time, the neighborhood is changing. This is a public document now, but I'm very excited to share with folks the Transform Poe is a new transformation plan that has been just accepted by HUD, just accepted by the U.S. Housing and Urban Development and submitted by the Housing Authority of Baltimore City to redevelop the Poe homes. And so you can Google Transform Poe, you can Google Poppleton, you can see this plan. It's a 200-page document. I'm not going to share all 200 pages, but part of the discussion about how to save the character of the neighborhood, how to really share the history, preserve this history, talk about the community that has lived here for over 80 years, talk about one of the oldest housing projects in the country and public housing policy and how a historic landmark can help anchor a community that unfortunately has seen a lot of disinvestment. The Transform Poe project is a very ambitious undertaking, but there are some very serious considerations considering now that the Poe homes are built directly onto us and we share a wall. So I'm very pleased that we got to be part, as stakeholders, we got to be part of the conversation and the community rally behind the museum to really advocate for our preservation as well as keeping the character of the neighborhood and really protecting the good that is here. So the Edgar Allan Poe homes are now slated for redevelopment. This is a process that we'll see a horizon of about 5 years. And so some really big changes are coming to Poe House. And how do we save, protect and preserve this historic landmark, and then also tell the story of the community that has protected us for such a long time. So we are very pleased to see that the intention is to replace one-to-one the subsidized units that are here, as well as bring mixed income housing and multifamily housing into the community, more community investment. And we're very pleased that one of the primary goals and strategies for this transformation plan is to promote neighborhood identity and the historical assets, and of course, Transform Poe, named for the Edgar Allan Poe House, named for the Edgar Allan Poe homes, and a special relationship in really preserving that. So there is a new concept plan derived from some planning that some of it came out of the festival, came out of community meetings, stakeholder meetings, a lot of discussion, and even the visitors that came for the International Edgar Allan Poe Festival, they had an opportunity to talk to the Housing Authority of Baltimore, talk to the Transform Poe plan. Folks really share some of this really great, their ideas for what they wanted to see from the site, what they wanted to see preserved, what they wanted to, what they thought was important. Constant themes of open space, more facilities, and keeping the spirit alive, the Poe legacy, literature, and community, very important part. So there is a new proposed plan for Poe House. Now, I know that this is a picture of the Flag House here in Baltimore, but their configuration very similar to what we're facing here in the city, whereas there's a historic building, there was an addition made in the 1950s, and then the potential new building built in the early 2000s for the Poe. The success of the Flag House is a model for what people are planning for Poe, the Edgar Allan Poe House. And so the new concept plan does call for adaptive reuse of the building that's immediately connected to us, and then proper setback to make our footprint within the Poe homes much more harmonious, and to provide a beautiful public space for the visitors who come. So I hear they might be playing my song. Am I?
Yeah. Rika, this is John's. I don't want to rush you too much, but we are a little over our half-hour limit, and then the mysterious clicking has returned. So
no, okay.
It might be your microphone brushing up against your arm or something like that. So
okay.
I don't know. It looks like you're getting close to being done. So I'll give you
a
1 minute warning here. How about that?
No, that's absolutely fine. This is my last slide. We do have an opportunity with Transform Poe and this new plan to not only tell the story, this 80-year story of the community, again, that has protected Poe House and the relationship that we've had for such a long time, but then also to welcome this new transformation, this revitalization that we hope keeps this community in place, but then also brings in positive elements and investment. So really looking forward to that. I'm done.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you. It seems like there is a bright future ahead for the Poe House, and indeed maybe for some of the Poppleton neighborhood as well. Again, if you've got questions for Enrica, please put them in the question and answer little box down there at the bottom of your screen. We've got one so far asking, are there any of the Poe home buildings that are planned to be preserved? And are they historic in and of themselves? Do you know about your neighbor?
We know that an architectural report was done that determined that the Poe homes over time have been altered to a degree that they're no longer considered historic. Now, the building, however, that is built onto Poe House, that is attached to us, that building is being saved from demolition, as much to protect Poe House as also to provide this sample of what was here. And it poses some interesting challenges because the Edgar Allan Poe House shares utilities with the housing project. And so lots of logistical issues that need to be worked out, a lot of capital grants that need to be written to assess these things. But the building that's immediately connected to us will be saved.
We've got another question here in the Q&A box asking about whether this a video of this presentation will be posted online, and the answer is yes. And Nathan from the Baltimore Architecture Foundation can jump in, but we're live on I think, is it YouTube or Facebook, and they get posted on the Baltimore Architecture Foundation's website. So maybe we can put in the chat box the link for where this presentation and indeed our past Friday afternoon virtual tours also show up. So that was a long way of saying yes, they are for sure. All right, it is 1:40. If you're still in there with us, thanks for hanging in there a few minutes late. If anybody has one more burning question for Enrica, we'll take it. I guess speak now or forever hold your peace. And if there's not, we will say thank you again to her. And I will just put in a plug and say that if you don't get the Poe House emails and announcements of their events, they are just magically creative in what they're doing, and I encourage you to check them out. You know, now Enrica says you can go and get a tour of the house all by yourself, or maybe your own little pod or whatever we call it. But yeah, check it out. We do have one more. Let's see. Has it been? Nope, I don't know if that's a question. So I will say thanks so much, and thank you for joining us, and hopefully we will see you next Friday. All right, have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks.